The real crisis in our cities isn't the heat or floods, it's how we plan for them.
Still dealing with the rural templates to trying to address the urban challenges. Our templates did not take pace with the changing scenario.
Traffic doesn't move, the air burns your lungs, and the heat never leaves the night. We keep adding flyovers, smart projects, new missions, yet somehow the cracks only get wider. Departments don't talk to each other, plans don't align, and cities keep breaking in slow motion.
Our urban problems are more multidimensional. We are planning our cities, unfortunately, however imperfect, in a siloed approach.
Because the truth is, our cities aren't machines to control. They are living, breathing ecosystems that we have forgotten how to care for. Why are Indian cities still governed by rules written a century ago when life around them has transformed? Hi, I'm Ruchita Bansal, and this is the HumanCity Podcast, a space where we explore how cities can be built on empathy, not just efficiency. My guest today is Hitesh Vaidya, former director of NIUA National Institute of Urban Affairs, a man who has spent over 2 decades at the intersection of policy and practice, trying to make our urban systems work for people, not just plans. Together, we unpack why Indian cities often feel like they are collapsing under their own weight and why it's time to move from control to care, from rigid planning to living frameworks that grow with our cities. Hi, Hitesh. Welcome to the Human City Podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Ruchita. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for, asking me for this podcast. Thank you for great introduction also.
Yes. Every year, we see cities flood, choke, and heat up. Yet the response often feels the same. What do these repeated crises reveal about how our cities are actually being managed?
Well, I definitely agree that as a common man, we see flood, heat, everything. But for me, as a planner, I see these are the ingredients. They are not harmful. It's because our coordination has gone broken down, and that is the why we see these challenges. We are planning our cities, unfortunately, however imperfect, in a siloed approach. The biggest challenge of coordination between the different agencies and also planning systems within the city framework. But because the ingredients, you can say the whole dish is bad. That's not a question. The dish is right, but it's just that we are not putting the ingredients in proper order and creating a recipe for.
But sir, we have known this for years that there is problem with the person making the dish. So why are we not really looking at or creating a reform which can help solve it?
I think the biggest challenge here is while we have become urban, our templates did not take pace with the changing scenario. So we are still dealing with the rural templates to trying to address the urban challenges. And our urban problems are more multidimensional. And how do you really change your templates as fast as quick they need to be is what we need to start thinking about. The experimentation which has happened from JNNURM, where we had everything at the center, to the smart city where we left the cities to decide their smartness and what they want. The whole shift in the planning thinking over time. When I remember JNNURM days, a smart plan from Hoshangabad will come all the way to center to get it approved. Whereas we saw the smart city mission where cities planned themselves, it got approved and center gave the broader framework. This whole process of evolvement of our planning process from the centralized planning to now moving for this local area planning in our new flagship missions in the country, it will take time, but I do agree that we have been thinking about it and we need to think much faster, more granular to move forward.
That's interesting, sir. Sir, also there's one another thing that most of the times we feel and we also see that our urban institutions are always so reactive. They always want to fix what is broken, but rarely anticipating on what is coming in coming years. So is it again because of the recipe and the person who is making the food, or is it something bigger?
I think again our mindset is to manage the villages, but for me, and planning is a verb, not a noun. So it is a continuous changing process. It needs flexibility of moving forward. And working on master plan of Delhi under my leadership, I've learned that we need to start thinking about planning in different aspects while we are thinking of urban. We don't go with the 20-year horizon. Things are changing very fast. Today I make plan for 2041. Neither I have seen 20,000. So we need to be continuously evolved because we are seeing so much of transitions happening, demographic, technological, whether climate. We have a vision where we want to go. We need to start working in a 5 years horizon and see whether we are in the right direction or not. That's one thing. Second thing, we think very narrow, a city with its duration value. All our challenges are beyond cities. We have lost a, a place called region because cities are not on their own. So there is a relationship between them, and city survives because of its region. So bringing back that regional planning framework has to be our thing. We either have a master plan at a city level or a district plan, but city also has to have a regional planning. Planning should be like a Google, zoom in and zoom out. When I go to a neighborhood, I zoom in, and when I go to a Gurgaon, I zoom out. Cities are not just a maps. Yeah. They are habitats, living beings. You can't put everything on a map. Every city has to be flexible to design based on USP. I was recently reviewing a master plan as an expert, and after listening half an hour, my only thing was, how do you really make that this is a plan of that city? Because the people who are planning, they've just picked up plan metropolitan. If people come to Ayodhya, people come to temple, they don't spend night in Ayodhya. They move out to Lucknow, Varanasi. How do you retain people in Ayodhya? You have to look at what other areas people can see with it after the temple to retain people in Ayodhya. Your infrastructure has to be built according to that need. We need to have our cities decide their planning. I don't want to talk about 74th Amendment because it has been too much talked about. You want me to become a Tendulkar, play the match, but you are not telling me any decision making on the ground. I'm dependent on finance to the state government, center from the missions, and then you want me to score a century? Sorry, I can't. So if we want our cities to be a Tendulkar, we have to be empowering them and preparing them to play the match on the ground.
So basically, sir, decision making has to be on the city end, which definitely makes sense. You mentioned about the Delhi master plan. Could you tell me this approach taken by your team to make it different? Because Delhi master plan was the first one which really talked about bringing in mobility and correlating it with environment. So could you speak a little about that?
I think for me, Delhi master plan, while it was an exercise, three things stood out. One thing was vision. What is that city we want to be? Do you want to make it administrative city? A residential city? It's not the words we say healthy, resilient, yeah, but in a broader mind framework, what you want Delhi to be. Second thing is stakeholder engagement. We talk to different stakeholders, private sector, civil society, accessibility groups, youth. So there was a multi-stakeholder consultations. Third was evidence-based. We looked at a lot of studies of Delhi and different countries. What happens if I have to do a parking spaces in Delhi? Different countries look at it. What are their norms? It took 4 years for us to conduct these studies. It was not an ad hoc thinking. We never thought it as a land use plan, it as a strategic plan. It was prepared by Delhi Development Authority. National Institute of Urban Affairs was a planning body. Urban local bodies was in transitions and all that. It would have had more interactions with them. Because people who are going to implement it should be involved in the first place. That's the challenge. Is because tomorrow you will blame Delhi Municipal Corporation or any urban local body to for a dish which he has not burned. Somebody else has burned it, and that's the big challenge. My mentor K.C. Shivramakrishnan used to always say that when we did a 74th Constitution Amendment, we said long live and don't give any responsibility, any resources. And I'm saying more than resources, you have to give respect to city authorities. You need to understand them as a third tier of governance, give them equal respect, will make them more responsible.
So whenever big events like Commonwealth Games or Pran Pratishtha in Ayodhya happen, the authorities come together. That's when the event can be successful.
Yeah.
But why don't we realize this in a regular manner? Because till the time you don't work together, you cannot achieve what you really want. So one has to be the capacity building, other has to be the participation, not only with public but also within the departments. So why are we lacking in there, and why is this important?
Well, it is quite important, but I definitely agree with you. The biggest thing we need to do change is a role given to governance. And I think governance comes the first thing. How do you govern those cities? And we need to shift our mindset in our policy thinking is not on what to do, how we do it, who is going to do it. And unless we shift on that who, nobody will be responsible. It's as a Mahabharata battle. Nobody was responsible for plight of Draupadi. When we had a 1992 74th Constitution Amendment, we created a lot of templates for that. And in the village where you don't have a multi-dimensional problem, we manage that pretty well. But when it comes to the urban thing, we are not able to change our systems of and we still remain with that. And unless we start revisiting the 74th Amendment and go to the back to the drawing table and say this worked, this did not work, this is how we should be now moving forward. Integration, coordination, good words, but who is going to do those integration, coordination is a big challenge. Under the Ministry of Environment, ECBC cell, ESCBC cells, ENS thing, there are they talking to the local body? What they are recommending are changing the bylaws of the city, influencing and nudging the building norms and the approval process. We all are putting a lot of data, but is that data really being integrated? So those are the institutional structural changes which we need to really start thinking of moving forward if we want to achieve that 5 trillion to 20 30 trillion economy.
So you mentioned about the financial autonomy to be given to the cities. And nowadays we hear about municipal bonds or climate linked funds. Do they really work in practice, or they are still symbolic?
I fully agree. And I still go with the analogy that biryani cannot be cooked without oil. Yeah. If you have to cook a biryani, you have to give the oil. And without financing, we will not think about building a cities. And when I say financing, and it's not about just numbers. It's about capacity, performance, and also a trust. I will give a money to my urban local body if I have a trust. The whole discussion with World Bank is talking about credit worthiness. Municipal bond, climate bond, green bond, they are just the instruments. I think the tools should be how do I want to go from X to Y and what type of money I have. 60% of India is still to be planned, and I see that an opportunity than the challenge. But while we are looking at master plan, we don't have even a financial plan in the master plan. You have a vision of 2041. You don't know what money I require for 2041. You do a financial structuring of that plan. You start breaking how much I require short term, medium term, long term, how I need upfront. And then you start looking at grants and what come from own sources, what come from the loaning agreement. Every city should have a strategic planning division. If we want to make cities as a business unit, we need to really start moving just for a planning exercise to strategic thinking exercise. Don't be a reactive. Start perceiving the challenges of 10 years down the line. If I'm constructing this flyover, is it constructed on a drain? Is it constructed on something? Will it hamper? So, if I need what type of urbanization I'm perceiving, what type of challenges, and so that's where we need to really think. I was working on when the National Urban Sanitation Mission long back, consultant made a report and gave it to us. One thing which he said has been in my mind. He says, if I plan based on what it is given to me, I'll plan so narrow that next generation when will come, they will tell who were the planners who prepared like this. And if I plan in such a way and infrastructure is not used, again people will blame me, saying that they created this elephant infrastructure which is not being used. So as a planner, balancing, optimizing, everything has to be done at a city level. What type of planning process, what type of infrastructure we really need to do. Unfortunately, data planning in projects, there is no coordination. We need a larger strategic planning. All our planning instruments in the city, the heat action plan, climate action plan, need to talk to each other.
You just mentioned about consultants. In most authorities or corporations, there is a lot of support taken from consultants, thinking that they can give us the best advice, but mostly they're just doing what the government says. So what is the solution to this? And other is, how do you bridge that gap? Because for basic master planning also, we are not having that capacity to make it on our own.
That's a very interesting question. I have been a consultant and I have been a government. The role of a city should be, how do we really utilize our consultants? Consultants should be only used as an experts, not become a substitute. I think we have to have a very subject specific, thematic specific consultant. While we need to have any institution, city organization, I think they need to have their own head chef. Then only you will take the full responsibility from chopping of onions to plating the dish. We use consultants as errand boys, and I'm being as candid as possible. But we need to have a clear thinking what role, what expertise they bring on the table, and how long. And then we create in house capacities. Unless you have a in house capacities within the cities, it's not going to solve the issues. Consultants bring a lot of new ideas and innovations, but who is responsible to deliver? Should be very, very clear. We had talked about creating a dedicated municipal cadre. If cities are the engines of growth, then we need tracks, which is institutional, and fuel, which is financing drivers, which is manpower, and have a clear pathways, which is direction, clear skilled manpower team, local bodies, and autonomy to design what they want without interference from.
Truly said, sir. And I also feel that consultants need to respect themselves. So nowadays there is a lot of talk about resilient cities. But what does resilience really mean beyond infrastructure for people, governance, and culture?
Everybody is talking about resilient cities, and that's the flavor of these years. But when we call about green infrastructure, what is green in green? Every city has to really define what is green and resilient for it. But and not only to build that infrastructure, it also has to last for longer period of time. While we have built over rivers, stopped natural drains, and we are saying that now we have to become a resilient. The villain is again our planning thinking. And I definitely need to start looking at each context. Is climate risk, flooding, heat, our building not enough to sustain heat? Do we need a cool roof? It's not one size fit all approach. But how do I build all this thinking in my building bylaws? And I nature based system as a city, what legal instruments I have to influence this green or resilient infrastructure? I have master plan, building bylaws, project preparation exercise from a feasibility report to DPR. Fourth is my RFP and contract document. And fifth is monitoring and budgeting. I might go on talking about resilient green unless it fit into my five larger thinking of where I can influence, monitor, push for this. I'll give you an again example. We were preparing harmonized guidelines. If I have to have accessible cities, then what is the instrument I have? So we look at RFP documents and we prepare a checklist. If you are creating a infrastructure like a stadium, for cricket stadium in the city, then at least these 10 things has to be looked at it to make them accessible. And we did an experiment, and we saw the change happen. That next RFP it came, first it was a checklist, it started mainstreaming within the contractual process. It started becoming the part of the RFP document. And I think those are the small and baby steps you have to take to influence. And every city is nowadays is happy that I am making a city climate action plan. Whether state climate action plan and city climate action plan talk to each other, I have not seen much of that talk. So what we are doing is tick marks very well, but have they started talking to each other? And that is where I think the challenge is. Yeah.
Sir, now when you mentioned about the climate change, I feel, the climate change is now trying to shape our urban design decisions. Like nowadays, there's a lot of push on EV vehicles. Then you have to come up with the infrastructure like that. Do you see India planning system really catching up with that urgency? And do you think whether what we're pushing with EV vehicles, is that the right way or that's the right approach?
Well, for the climate, I strongly feel we are as confused as Arjun was in Mahabharat's field. He didn't know whether I should pick up my weapons and strike, or should I hold or not strike. I think that's where we are in the climate. We are more reacting. When I was doing a master plan Delhi, we also proposed this happened. The lieutenant governor of Delhi at that time, he says, hey, you are talking about my buses to be EV electric buses. Do we have an infrastructure for that? Do we have a capacity to maneuver within our streets for that type of buses? Just talking EV, it looks good, but also start thinking how do you retrofit your infrastructure. You can't have old road designs and then think of a new instrument to play in that. So it has to be both forward looking as well as look backward. Have a whole 360-degree thinking and have a very clear view what I am trying to really influence and has impact, whether it is a street vendor or driver and a slum dweller. We is a great area, but we need to be cautious. How does EV movement really align with our planning instruments, planning processes, planning approaches? All three of them has to be very clearly thought about before we go really mass movement of EV systems.
So we've talked about a lot of issues, but what are some positive shifts you have seen in how cities are trying to integrate accessibility, environment, equity, and governance?
Looking at JNNURM to Smart City Mission and all of them have been a great change. I don't say JNN was bad. All of them has shifted our mindset towards a new thinking. Last 10, 15 years has been the shift. Lot of our shift in thinking happened due to COVID also. We realized that neighborhood matters. So I planning has to be community driven, local driven, neighborhood driven, whether influencing through local area plan under the Amrut mission, whether all redevelopment or green projects under the smart city mission. Second thinking, which is people have realized that climate is not a city centric issue. Climate goes beyond the city. So the new thinking is the city region approach, mainstreaming of peri-urban areas and a regional approach together to make a economic shift has been quite a positive change. But change which I think has been that we have not planned 50% of our cities. We also see a 54% of infrastructure still to be built. So a new shift of climate centric or inclusive and accessible thinking for the new infrastructure by 2047 going to leapfrog. Earlier these were just the terms: inclusive, accessible, green, and now with a lot of dialogues, deliberations, will move to the action. Last, partnerships and coalitions. Nobody has answer. We have to partner with each other. We understand the existence of different players, different departments has to come together at a city level and start talking to each other.
So you have worked for more than 2 decades and you've worked with many different kind of people and different departments. Do you think that having a woman on the table makes a difference?
It has to make, it must be. One morning when I was a part of an NIUA, I was celebrating Women's Day and I looked at the board behind from 1976 till I was there. There was no women director at NIUA. So it gives a very big statement saying that the National Urban Think Tank is a very male oriented thinking. So if, and I made a statement that I hope and I wish next director should be the woman director in NI, because when the women becomes empowered, then she brings the 60 degree thinking. I just wrote an article last year on Navdurga, and each Navdurga bring the different type of thinking and how we should be reorienting our thinking towards more gender oriented for day to day actions at the city level. So my experience, wherever we had a majority of municipal councillors as women, I see a lot of enthusiasm and hunger to do better by the lady municipal councillors in the city level, and they are ready to take those challenges and ready to learn more on subjects. And I'm talking about this from my experiences when I interacted with women mayors and councillors. I found them to be more challenging and more aggressive in their thinking and moving forward. Yeah.
Sir, looking ahead to 2047, what would a truly human Indian city look like to you?
Being as candid as possible. If I am able to address the challenges of today, I can address the challenges in 2047, and we'll cross the bridge when it comes. But we should be preparing for 2047. But what thing which I see, and that's purely my experience from NIUA and UN Habitat last 10 years, is the whole emergence of young people in this urban planning process, because I see the creativity and the fire, the hunger which these people have. This young generation is saying, why should I go this side? Why not this side? They have a passion, they are ready to experiment, and they have a hunger to do better. The challenge is, how do you excite this young generation to walk in the cities, to the administration, with the city challenges? I think with the 2047, if we want to achieve, we need to harness this young generation to do better, excite them to really align with the process of urban challenges. They are already there, but it's a lot of handholding, lot of igniting those thoughts, and for them to see cities as place to work. We need to have a much more aggressive approach of bringing youth to solve the problems of 2047.
This has been great, sir. We do know that cities are messy, but maybe that's their magic. They are alive, restless, and full of possibilities. My conversation with Hitesh Vaidya reminds us that real urban planning isn't about control, it's about care. And what I'll take out from this is that cities need to be given that freedom and they need to capacitate themselves. If people don't accept the plan, it's not people who failed, it's the plan that failed. And what would it mean to build a city that listens as it grows? I would love to hear your thoughts. Share your answer in the comments. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.